Hello, I'm Michelle O'Loughlin, studying part-time ceramics at ASP in Auckland. I decided to talk about my experience making plaster molds to create new vessels. This journey started at the beginning of our longest lockdown yet. It's been full of challenges, but also joyful surprises and happy accidents. Challenge 1. Gather all the tools and materials and map out a space in the garage where I could get messy, and I did. So pulling all my resources, I got a large bag of plaster delivered and a 10-litre bucket of porcelain slip. The plaster is a river before it becomes a warm active block, so I found wood and lino from a local skip and I used this to contain the monster. Our mold making brief was given virtually. We were asked to create a model to make an interesting mold from. I cobbled together jar lids, containers, and old printing blocks that Dad had made door handles, lampshade bases, and wall hangings from when we were kids. I wanted the objects to be useful, but also a little bit of fun and something relevant to me. Mold making is an ancient craft. Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans have all used this technique to replicate objects and even living things. Michelle Erickson, the contemporary American ceramicist, inspired my research. I love her use of political statement in pottery, along with her incredible skill at recreating handmade ceramic pieces from history. She studies how things were made and shares the skill with other makers. For the first week, you could say I was in a creative slump. Managing the day-to-day of work and family, I decided to do what always makes me happy. I decided to make, to cut, to sew, and construct an object with a message I wanted to share. Our previous tutor was Annie MacGyver, who sculpts humans and animals' forms with porcelain paper clay. Annie said, if you create something that comes from your heart, the viewer will see that. Bernard Palissy, a 16th century artist, made some incredible serveware. I watched a video about him which motivated me to create something realistic and playful. Palissy used real animals and creatures to create his beautiful slip-cast forms. The realism he managed to achieve in this technique inspired me to try and create texture and messages in my piece too. I wanted the jug to be useful. It needed to be light but also reasonable volume, so I added a bowl before I stitched the old jeans onto the jug. I hand sewed the jeans onto the form and tried to create as few undercuts and areas that would make the mould too complicated. I embroidered and patched and decorated the jug. I'll explain the significance of each addition later. So the model could be released easily, professional soft soap is used, but you can also use a grated sunlight soap and add water to make a filler paste to help stop minor undercuts. Once the jug was covered in soap, it was left to dry. I used a light cover so as to keep as much denim texture as possible. I modelled 3 types of cups and chose one to be my first victim. The first part of creating a mould from an object is to decide how many sections you will need. Because I had folds in the fabric, my cup needed 3 pieces. I used a tube shape with a liner rather than the wood coddle, so I'd use less plaster. You can see in the photo that I made keys for the mould and soaked the plaster after. I think they call it plaster disaster. I know now you always need to have everything ready to go, and if you're guessing volume like me, you need to have something ready to pour the excess onto. Here's a few of my disasters, but then also to the right you can see my press of found objects and a pour onto polystyrene, which has led to other side hustles into texture and colour. My usual fashion, I ignored the good advice from the experts and I created an object larger than the suggested 1 litre and a model that needed 4 sections of plaster. I was excited about the challenge and I was going to give it a go. Here you can see the various stages of the process. Peeling the mould back is as satisfying as finding fossils or pulling glue off your hand as a kid. I made a press mold version first. I could see there was some undercuts and it wasn't perfect, so I treated it as a sculpture. That's what's great about mold making. You can repeat the same object and add a different personality to each one. Inspired by Helen Johannesson and Annette Bugansky, I experiment with fabric and thread dipped in slip and then added to the jug. Here are my 2 moulds for the jug and the cup. I've tried to show you the scale in this photo. The jug mould weighs 7 kilos, so once I add the slip, as you can imagine, I need a friend to help me. The slip is left in the mould for a time, that is trial and error. Then when the clay stops being shiny, you trim back the extra and wait before revealing the cast. Here you can see my 2 fired and glazed jugs. The one on the left was a press mould and then adapted. The blue jug and cups are usable and have iron oxide and cobalt oxide with a clear glaze. I'm not too happy with the interior glaze, so I'm working on some new tests. What's great about moulds is I can make version after version. Now I have my pattern. I looked at several books and magazines, but to be honest, YouTube and Pinterest has been the most useful for learning. The Robertson Library book was Paper Clay Art and Practice by Rosette Gaunt. Additions to Clay Bodies by Kathleen Standen is also inspiring too, as I plan to do more with this going forward. Angela Meller is a paper clay artist who uses English bone china paper clay to create beautiful and light-filled bowls of pattern and texture. I used her technique to form flat plaster molds and then make a fabric by spreading paper clay over the slab, then tearing and sticking pieces onto a pre-made simple mold. Empty vessels make the most noise. This might be a self-reference, I'm not sure yet. What I love about this technique is the plasticity of the paper clay, and I see many ways I can use pattern cutting skills to form shapes to make three-dimensional forms. The photo on the left is mid-fired porcelain. The two on the right I am high-firing to create more transparency. Did you know it takes 7,600 litres to make one pair of jeans? The sticking plaster represents short-term fixes. Pennies in the pocket are the pittance for the workers. The heart patch is to remind me to keep creating from the heart and not the ego. And make, do and mend is to remind us of past austerity measures that we should maybe consider now. Empty Vessels is about words and letters that mean very little at the moment. There are protest marches that seem useless and so many daily announcements that nobody really understands. It's almost as if the power of the word means nothing now. But when it seems dark, there will always be light coming through eventually. Shine a light on the nonsense of words and the value of true action. Thanks for watching my presentation. Here are the links for my bibliography and video citation.